Now the next one, upset the right people. How many of you are ready to do that? You've already got their names, right? Upset the right people. Okay, the first point is the wrong way to make decisions. I had a client one time who was the head of an organization, about 3,000 employees or so, and he had been hired, the board of directors hired him with the turnaround project. And the turnaround project was the organization had been going like this for a number of years and then it plateaued. And it had been going like this for a while, and they said, this is not good because anything that is alive is growing. If things stay flat, that's a bad sign. And he joined it about here, but he wasn't the head of it. But he had been in it a while, had enough relationships in it, understood it. The organization promoted him to the head of it and said, we want you to turn it around. He said, I'll do it under one condition. The one condition is that you allow me to do the following 3 or 4 things, because he thought he understood what the problem was. And he listed what the 3 or 4 things were, and they said, fine, and they wrote him kind of a blank check to do that. Well, one of the 3 or 4 things was that he thought the entire structure of it all needed to be changed. And what that meant was that he was going to have to, a lot of people are going to have to go away. He was going to have to move a lot of other people. He's going to have to change their jobs. And this was going to have enormous relational fallout. I mean, this was a hard call. And there were going to be people that were upset. There were going to be people that hated him. There were going to be people that, he was going to disrupt a lot of people's lives in order to do this. But that was what had to be done, or it wasn't going to work. Now, that's something that, a lot of people make those decisions all the time. But what I knew about this guy was that he was very, very, very sensitive to other people's feelings. Now, not in a codependent way, but he's a guy that really cared about how people felt and had really good relationships. And when he told me what he was going to have to do, I actually thought, I don't think he can do this. It's just too bloody. It's just going to be too hard. Knowing how much he cares, I don't think he can do this. And so what happened was, he did it. And he pulled it off. And it was a mess. A mess in a productive way, but it was a mess. People that he had friendships, long-term relationships with, they really got bugged at him and can't believe you're doing this. And after all, I've known you and you're moving me, and on and on and on and on. And I met with him and I said, what went on inside of you? How did you do this about what people were going to feel, when you made this decision? And he said, well, I had to do it. I said, but what happened inside of you? And he said, well, and this is the key. This is a great formula to remember. What he said was, what you need to do that is right to do, and what people feel about that are 2 different problems. And he said, so I had to solve both of them. What you have to do that is right is problem number 1. What people are going to feel about that is a different problem that has to be solved as well. He said the problem is when people make them the same problem. Because when you do that, then, as the point says, this is the wrong way to make decisions. Because what's happened is that what the repercussions are, and if people are upset, if that has too much weight, then what is right to do goes away. Now, we're not talking about being insensitive. He said that is a problem to be solved. So what he did after he made the decision was he spent the better part of about 6 or 8 months basically flying around the country meeting with these individuals and hearing their pain and understanding their dilemma and agreeing with them about how bad it was and joining them in all of the mess and doing whatever he could, as we said in a previous principle, whatever he could to make it better. But that didn't affect whether or not he had to do it. Do you see the difference? What other people do is they come to situations and they think, I need to do this, but so-and-so is really going to be upset. So I can't do that. And as your next point says, that's the wrong compass. That's the wrong compass. I can't tell you how many times, it's zillions of times, and if you sat in that chair, you would see the same thing. But in doing live radio now for call-in radio for what we started, how many years is that? 17. We're in our 17th year of doing radio. It's just, you can just, and if those of you who've heard the show, you see the formula as well. When people call in and say, I got this problem in this relationship and there's this conflict, and we say, well, I think what you need to do is you need to talk to the person and say A, B, C, or D. And when you hear the next thing out, and it's always the next thing out of their mouth. They don't even go, I want some milk and cookies first. The next thing out of their mouth is, but what if he says, or but what if she says, because it is to them, that's the compass of, and usually it's a confrontation. You want them to go confront somebody or speak the truth to somebody or stand up for something. And the immediate thing that is bound to that is the other people's reaction. But what if they get angry? But what if they get upset? Or what if it hurts their feelings? And yes, that's a problem. But that's not part of the compass. It's not part of how you set your heading. You've heard us probably quoted before. It's Proverbs 19:19. And here's what it says. Do not rescue an angry man, lest you have to do it again tomorrow. Now here's what that means. If you make a decision, or you go confront somebody, or you stand up for something, it's the right thing to do, okay? But they're going to get upset, or when they get upset, then you back off because somebody's upset or doesn't like the decision that you're going to make. You think you've solved the problem. Well, okay, I won't do that decision because somebody gets upset. Here's what you've done. You have set the formula for the next decision you have to make that they don't like. And that's why on the outline, if you look in there, I think I put it in there, it says the toddler rescue down there. I'm going to come back to that. But that's what you're dealing with. See, if you've ever been around toddlers, it's really not the what that's important. Does the world really end because they can't have a lollipop? They act like it, right? Is the world really over because you can't watch Elmo the 15th time? Is life going to really cease to exist the way we understand it in the Western world? But the rage, the temper tantrum, all of that, and you see parents who they say, you can't have that or don't do that or whatever, and the toddler throws the fit, and what they do is they either placate them with okay, just one more time, you can have this, or they give them something else, or they do the worst, wherever this formula came, give them something else or distract them. God forbid that they would have to learn to be happy with no. But that's the new formula out there. You always distract them and give them an alternative. What happens is you're training them. The way to be in charge of the world is to throw a temper tantrum, and we'll just make whatever decision you want as long as you get upset enough. But I need you to get upset enough to know what to do. Now that's cute for a while at 18 months. You put it in a 45-year-old body, it's not cute anymore. But see, that's what happens every day. And many, many people decide as the compass of whether or not they're going to say something or like something or choose something or the compass is basically, well, who's going to be upset with that? And you know what? The really successful people, both in relationships, because they go to their spouses and they say, you know what, you're not going to like this, but A, B, C, or D. Or in their life of extended relationships, or in business, they basically are just direct and honest, and then the fallout of that they deal with as a second problem. So what do we mean by compass? A compass sets to a heading, okay? And if you've ever been, for example, I really enjoyed the ocean and boating and stuff like that. And one of my favorite things to do is if you're going to Catalina or somewhere offshore, and you have an autopilot and you plug in the heading, right? If you plug it in and you put a boat on autopilot, you sit back and you just watch it. And what it does is it's going on a heading. Now, if you're out here in the Pacific Ocean, most times of year, at various times, it's not like a pond. There's this big swell that comes, and sometimes those can be, pretty big waves, and they'll hit the boat and knock it off the heading, every 8 seconds or so. They'll hit it, and you'll see immediately an autopilot, when it gets hit, immediately corrects. And it's really cool to watch a boat just go, when it gets hit. Now, what happens with people who have the right compass, and that is that they're internally in charge of making decisions before God and their values and what's good and what's right and what's needed to be done. They set their heading, and then the people's reactions come, and they try to knock them off, and they object, and they throw temper tantrums, and they do all this stuff, but the autopilot of their character brings it back. And they treat each one of those things respectfully, and they hear it. And each time a wave comes, I go, gosh, I understand you're upset. Tell me what this decision did to you. And they don't fight it, and they don't try to, talk the person out of their feelings, but they never leave their course. Now, some of you are facing maybe some hard decisions. And some of you are facing some decisions that you know what the right thing to do is, but what's keeping you from doing the right thing is that sometimes somebody's going to be upset, okay? But that's the wrong compass. Now, let me give you just quickly a few of the things or the ways that these fears get in the way. If you are a loving person, okay? If you're a loving person, the fear of hurting someone probably is something that goes through your head. Remember a woman I worked with one time who she was in this relationship, had been dating this guy for about 8 or 10 months or so. And she just kind of figured out this just wasn't the right relationship. There were just some things wrong. So it came time to break up, and each time she would go break up, she would not do it. And she'd come back to her session, and I'd go, and? She'd go, I couldn't do it. And after a few times of this, what emerged was what was keeping her from pulling the trigger was not fear of being alone. It wasn't fear of not finding anybody else. Basically, she was over-identifying with his hurt, and she said, it's just going to hurt him too bad. I can't tell him I don't want to see. I just get to that point, and I know it's going to hurt him. And I said, that's what breaking up does. It hurts. She goes, I know. I said, but that's part of the deal. It hurts. Sometimes the truth hurts. And here's what I want you to ask yourself. Do you think it's going to harm him? Or is it going to hurt him? She says, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got to learn the difference between hurt and harm. Hurt is when we make decisions that conflict with what somebody else desires or what they want, and that hurts. Or we make decisions to confront somebody and they find out something negative about themselves. That hurts. But like the Bible says, the wounds of a friend, wounds hurt, remember, the wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy. So there's nothing bad or wrong about hurting each other. I mean, life does that. If you want to go out to dinner with somebody, you get your heart set on this, and they say, I don't want to go there, or I don't want to do this, or I've got something better to do. That hurts. Not a lot, shouldn't hurt a lot, but, it's a little bit of a loss. If you want to date somebody and they don't want to date you, that hurts. But see, nobody's doing anything wrong. That's the nature of life, that life gives us disappointments as people make various kinds of choices. That's okay. That's just part of disappointment. Anybody, or I should say it this way, anybody goes through life and their goal in life is to never be hurt, they will never live. Why do I feel like Bette Midler right now? Wasn't it her that... What's the song? The Rose. Was it Bette Midler? Yeah? Help me. What are the lyrics? It's the soul that feels like, or fears dying, that never learns to live. Come on, somebody can sing this. Anyway. What? No, not the Wind. It's the Rose. It is the Rose. The soul afraid of dying that never learns to live. Da-da-da. Anyway, okay. Bad example. You guys don't have Bible programs, you don't listen to music. Okay. If you succeed in life, you will get hurt, period. C.S. Lewis put it this way. I think it's C.S. Lewis. If it wasn't, I'm sure he would have believed this. I think it was C.S. Lewis. He said, there is a place where you can be absolutely safe from the pain of love. And that place is hell. Okay? Those are your options. Don't get hurt or go to hell. Right? So, if we are afraid sometimes of doing the right thing, that it might hurt someone's feelings, what we're in a sense doing is we're infantilizing them and keeping them from having, part of what it means to belong to the human race. Now, that's different than harming someone. Harming someone is when we do things that are injurious to people, that basically are trespassing or stepping over a line. For example, if she had been duplicitous with this guy and lied to him and seduced him, having no intention of ever being genuine or this, that, and the other, or she did it in some kind of betrayal, you follow me? Then that's a harmful thing to do because that destroys people's trust. But that's not what she was doing. She was just going to give him some disappointing news. So, it's like this in parenting. I hope you hurt your children in a good way. Discipline hurts. I don't want you to harm them. In fact, David had a really problematic son. If you go back and read it in the Old Testament, he had one son that actually tried to do him in. And in the introduction, I think it's in 1st or 2nd Kings. I'd have to look at it. But in the introduction of describing him, he said it says that David had never vexed him by interfering with him or by disciplining with him or saying to him, why do you behave this way? In other words, his father never had gotten in his face and caused vexation, the vexation of discipline. Some of the things you're going to have to do. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. So learn the difference between hurt and harm. And don't be afraid that sometimes you have to do things that are hurtful, but avoid harming people. Okay? The next one is the fear of guilt. Good old guilt, the gift that keeps on giving. I saw this thing on 60 Minutes one time. Where it's about dealing with aging parents and how hard it is and this, that, and the other. And this guy had to put his mom in a nursing home. And what he would do is he was committed to going and seeing her, but she was in the nursing home. She's sitting there in her chair like this at the end of the hall. They take the cameras in. She's sitting there, because he would go see her every day at lunchtime. And he would go see her, and he was going to be there for, 20 or 30 minutes. He did this every day. It was his gift to her and caring about her and all this. But you could see her at the end of the hall. She's sitting there waiting on him. Because she is so mad that he's going to leave in 30 minutes. He hadn't even gotten there yet. But she's got the guilt ready to go. And he shows up and he says, "Hey, Mom, how you doing?" "Well, it's about time you got here, and I bet you're going to leave again in 30. And after all I've done for you, and I wiped your diapers and we get all this, and he's nodding and he's going, "Sounds like it's been a rough day, Mom." And he's just doing, and then he says, "Okay, well, I hope you have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow." And he leaves. And they interviewed him, and I think it was 60 Minutes. It's one of those magazine shows. And he was talking about, well, I just understand that's her. And she puts out the guilt, and he said, it's like the Bible says, purpose in your heart what you're going to give. And he said, this is the amount of time that I can give to her. He said, I go visit her every day. It's all I can do. I can't do more, and she's never going to like it. But that's what I need to do and he said, for my own family and my work and this, this is how much time I got. Now think if her guilt had the power to reset his heading or his compass. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? Jesus was asked one time what love looked like. And he said, well, there's this guy, and he was walking along a road, and somebody, a band of robbers came and beat him up, and they left him for dead in the road. And all these people came by, and they just didn't do anything. But there was this one guy who came along, and he picked him up, and he took him to an inn. And remember what the story says? He gave the innkeeper money. It says, take care of him. And then he went about his business, and he said, but I'll be back, and when I return, I'll pay the rest of the bill. And Jesus said, that's what love looks like. See, he took care of the person. But he also, while he was taking care of the person, he said, but I've got to go do some things as well, and I'll be back. That's the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, the version that got lost, that never got in there was another story called The Codependent Good Samaritan. And that version goes like this. He picks the guy up off the road, he takes him to the inn, he pays his bill, and he says, I got to go to work, and he starts to leave, and the guy who's all beat up says, what, you're leaving me? You're just going to dump me in this inn, and that's it? Go do it, take care. What could be more important? I'm dying here. These people left me in the road for 3 days. You call yourself a Christian? Now, obviously, that got left out of the Bible for good reason. But have you guys ever been there? You're giving to someone, and it's not enough? Well, like Proverbs says about the leech, there's the sister and the other sister, and their only words they know are more. You have people in your life, it will never be enough. But you have people who think that, well, if I give a little more, if I give a little more, if I give a little more, and that's the compass heading by which they steer the ship. And when we said, in the beginning, upset the right people, let me tell you who to upset. The leeches, the guilt manipulators, the toddler temper tantrum throwers, the control freaks, the psycho-envious idiots. I don't know technical terms for these people, but you know what they look like. Basically, they're people that want to suck the life out of you, and then when it's all gone, be mad at you that there's not more. And they don't take responsibility for themselves. And that has nothing to do with love. But they'll tell you it does. They'll act like you're not loving them or you're not doing the right thing because they're not getting everything they want. Okay? So that's what we mean by upset the right people. And then the next one is the toddler rescue. I've talked about that, but that's basically when you make a decision and the only reason you change is because somebody has a temper tantrum. Avoiding people's anger is not the reason to do things. It's like, it's like appeasing terrorists. Okay, and the next one is approval and love. Approval and love. Some people need approval and love so much that they can't make the right decision. I've got a friend who is a pastor, and he is now in his 50s. And his work as a pastor has literally influenced millions of people. I mean, he's just had an incredible fruit from his ministry. When he was in college and became a Christian, at that time he wasn't a pastor who had influenced millions of people. He was the son of a very successful businessman in a family business that had turned into a public company, and he was kind of the heir apparent, and his father had groomed him through business school and all of this to kind of, take over. And then this guy becomes a Christian in college, and he receives a call from God to go into the ministry. And he goes and tells his father he won't be following in his footsteps. He's going to become a pastor. It did not go well. It did not go well at all. His father basically disowned him. And the reason he disowned him was all of this stuff about how can you do something that, that has such little, get a man's job, get a real man's job. And he's berating him for not being a real man and not having guts to go out there and do this, that, and the other. When the paradox of this was, if the guy had no guts, he would have done what Daddy wanted. Right? It's really funny to berate somebody when they're standing up to you for having no guts. That's the light bulb that didn't go on. So what he did was, he said, sorry, Dad, I love you, and I know you want what's best for me, but we disagree on what that is, and I got to go this path. Now, there are other people that their need for somebody's love or approval is so great they could not have made that decision. The Bible calls us over and over and over and over to not make decisions based on needing the approval or the love of other people. Love and approval is something that is, and it's going to be given to you basically as you, kind of are somebody who, shows up and merits it. But number two, based on the capacity of the other person, whether they are the kind of people that love and approve or not. If you're with a critical, controlling person, guess what critical and controlling people do? What do? They criticize and they control. They don't love and approve. If you got a dog, you want him to meow, it's not what they do. That's not what critical people do. So when we have an inordinate need for love or approval from any particular person, then that inevitably is going to get in the way of sometimes making the right decision. And then the last point there says, or the next last, strategy is not bad but wise. What I don't mean by this is throwing wisdom to the wind and just going and saying, well, I don't care how people feel about it, this is what I'm going to do. Or the converse of that sometimes if you know there's going to be a mess, sometimes it is wise to not go make the mess, but to be very strategic about how you work with problematic people. But see, that's different than doing it out of fear. If you know somebody's going to blow up and you know somebody's going to like this and you got a family situation, don't just say, heck with it and throw caution to the wind. Sometimes it's very important to not do that for a season for various reasons. Sometimes it's very important to have other people involved. Sometimes it's very important to have a totally different strategy, and on and on and on. But what I'm saying is that needs to be a strategic decision, not a fear decision. And those are very different. So sometimes we do choose not to upset people for strategic reasons. Sometimes people do choose not to do a confrontation or an intervention or throw somebody out, for example, because maybe the spouse is an idiot, but it would be bad for the kids in that season. Or. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons by which sometimes the right thing, it supersedes the right thing. Right? There's the right thing to do, and there's the right decision, and this is what we ought to do, but there's a bigger reason not to right now. But that bigger reason not to is not fear. The bigger reason not to is a bigger reason. So sometimes it is the right thing to avoid upsetting some people. I have a friend whose house is burglarized. A guy walks in with a gun. And you know what he said to him? Tell me what you want. I will give you everything you want. Followed around with a bag and just gave it to him. Upset the right people. He could have, because the guy's an athlete, he's a fighter and all this, and he said there were a couple of moments where he could have gone for him. But it was wiser to not upset the guy. Now that's an extreme example, but you have miniature examples in your families and friendships of all the time where there are masked people with guns, metaphorically speaking. And you don't upset them because you're working out a bigger strategy. Okay? So set your heading, and the heading is to set it on what is right before God, what is loving for other people, but what is purposeful. And not out of, because you're afraid that the wrong kinds of people, which are arrogant, controlling, temper tantrum, guilt-inducing, all sorts of other kind of character issues, guide your ship.